I got seas going right across my deck here now. I did not up in his vicinity, but no, I didn't. So this is Goose 2. Roger. Thanks for that information, sir, and I'll get back to you if we come up with anything. Over.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Beyond the Breakers, a podcast about shipwrecks, loss, and lessons learned from maritime disasters. My name is Taylor. I'll be one of your hosts. And joining me in just a few brief seconds will be Tanner. But before we do that, let's do the most important thing. Let's shout out a few new patrons. Q Kong, Kane, George, and Kate. Thank you very much for signing up for the Patreon. We appreciate that support, and we hope you enjoy all of the unique content that we put on there. With that out of the way, let's go ahead and bring in Tanner. Tanner, how you doing?
Pretty good, and it sounds like you have a new microphone.
I do. We've used some Patreon dollars to upgrade a few things.
I technically have one, but it's not totally working yet. But yeah, I can actually hear you as we're recording. So that's
hopefully it'll help your post-production go a little smoother.
So that's good.
It is. What have you been up to media-wise or just in general?
Yeah, it's been a long time since we recorded. It's been almost 3 weeks, I think, since we recorded our last main episode.
Yeah, with holidays and stuff. It's we're just getting out of that busy time of the year. So it'd be nice to be a little more consistent.
We did quite a bit of stuff. We went to Katie's parents' house on Christmas Eve. Had a pretty chill Christmas Day and New Year's. We did go to see Nosferatu. We don't normally go to movies on big movie seeing days. So that's our first time we've seen a movie in an actual crowded theater. But it's a great movie. I really enjoyed it. I really like Robert Eggers' other movies that I've seen. I really like The Lighthouse, and I really like The Witch. I have not seen The Northman, but I thought that Nosferatu was really, really good. We really like Nicholas Hoult because of the series The Great. We really like him in that. So it was fun to see him in a very different type role.
Mm-hmm.
Willem Dafoe was excellent in it, as expected. Also, another thing we literally just watched this was the new Kunk on Life special on Netflix. It was very, very good. We really enjoyed Kunk on Earth. This is just I think it's an hour and 10 minute. It was very, very good.
That's one I've been wanting to watch those. They look really funny.
People who follow me / the show online probably have seen that one of our cats, Josephine, passed away yesterday, very, very unexpectedly. So we wanted to do something fun together. So we watched Kunk on Life, and we each ate a whole tub of Ben & Jerry's ice cream.
Yeah, that's
yeah.
Sometimes that's what you got to do, right?
So aside from that, the book I've been mainly reading recently is called A Great and Terrible King by Mark Morris. This is it's a biography of Edward I of England, as seen in the documentary Braveheart. And I've previously read Mark Morris's biography of King John and his book on the Norman conquest of England. I really love the way he writes. Mm-hmm. I love that period of history, and he's a very good presenter of it in terms of crafting the narrative, presenting things in an interesting way.
I'll have to read some of his stuff. I have not read anything.
I think you'd really, really enjoy it. I like this one particularly the way that he sort of brings a thread forward in time and then sort of jumps back to talk about a parallel thread occurring over the same period of time.
Nice.
And I think one of the most interesting things about that book is I've read a lot more since I've been interested in the period. I've read a lot more about the conquest of Wales than I have the conquest of Scotland and Edward I, or the attempted conquest of Scotland, rather. And Edward I is kind of the big figure in the famous portions of both of those. Mm-hmm. And it's really interesting the detail that Morris goes into about the sort of the political structure existing in both of those places before the English attempts to conquer them, and how Wales, this is something that's fleshed out a lot in Sharon K. Penman's novels, but how Wales has this system of division where, when a prince, a lord dies, everything's divided equally among his sons. So if he has however much land, it's going to be divided roughly equally among his, 4 or 5 kids. Mm-hmm. Which is great for trying to make everyone happy, but is not great for building long-term political power, because you're always cutting things into smaller pieces, and those princes are always fighting against each other for more. So when you have an outside invader, there is less of a unified front that you can present to fight that off. You're always going to have princes allying with the invaders and fighting against, the native princes. And that's very much how and why Wales today is just subsumed into England, for governmental purposes. Whereas Scotland, it is part of the UK, but not because it was conquered militarily. And so how Scotland, as Edward is trying to basically get his hands on Scotland as a part of his realm, he has a bit harder time, and he has to be a bit more nuanced with how he does it, because there is a pre-existing kingship. It is a pre-existing unified territory that is much more able to resist when it chooses to. So it is a lot of interesting stuff going into there. At this point, I'm almost done with the book. I'm pretty late in Edward's life, so getting into his attempts to basically make sure that Scotland remains a subservient kingdom to England, even if in name an independent one. So yeah, I've really enjoyed that book. It might be my favorite of the ones I've read of his. He's got one other that's he may have more, but I know he has one that's just about the Anglo-Saxons in general.
I feel like that's the one I've probably seen the most.
That's his newest one that I know of. Although, I mean, even the term Anglo-Saxons is sort of has been somewhat problematized of late for various reasons. But yeah, I've really enjoyed reading that. Kind of burned through it the last few days. How about you?
Oh, what have I been up to? I have finished SPQR by Mary Beard. It was very good. It was a nice, kind of high-level overview of the Roman Empire and stuff like that. It was nice seeing her talk about just, normal people quite a bit. There's quite a focus put on not just royalty and things like that, but also just, what is the common, middle-class Roman experiencing in these times? So it's very interesting.
I'm flipping through it now. It's organized more thematically, right? If I remember correctly.
Yeah, it's not super chronological. It definitely jumps, from kind of main point to main point. But it's good. It was a very good read. I think it's one that you recommended to me. So definitely have enjoyed that. Since I finished that, I started Midnight at Chernobyl by Adam Higginbotham, and I am loving it so far. If you enjoyed the Chernobyl miniseries, which I'm sure many of our listeners did, you'll really like this. It's very good.
Chapel Roan has told me that everything good happens after midnight. Is that true for Chernobyl as well?
Not much good happened after midnight. Yeah, that's a good book so far. I have not read anything by him before, so I'm really enjoying his style. He's a journalist, so sometimes I feel like these books written by journalists are a lot easier to read than kind of the more pure historian books.
Right, because I mean, presumably they're more used to writing for an audience that is, I guess, sort of has a finite amount of attention they want to pay to something, so that you need to tell this in a way that's engaging.
Sort of like Dead Wake, I think, is a great example of a book that if a historian wrote it, it would be kind of boring, but Erik Larson really brings that one to life. So yeah, that's been really fun. I have been back on the City Skylines train. It's really fun spending a couple dollars on some DLC. Kind of totally changes that game and makes it fun and fresh.
Is that sort of like SimCity? Have we talked about this, I think, already?
It's basically the most modern version of. It definitely emphasizes some different things than SimCity did, but it's fun. I enjoy it. It's a good way to kind of scratch that SimCity itch if you're still into that kind of thing. But
you can institute an all DEI city council.
That would be Workers and Resources, which is another game I'm thinking about getting.
Okay.
It's, what if SimCity was in the Soviet Union?
Okay, that does sound cool.
Yeah, I might look at that at some point.
It would be called Simsk, I think would be the Russian name for it.
The other thing that we've been up to is we started watching The Righteous Gemstones, which is so good. Everyone
there
on
will come a payday, hallelujah, what a payday. Oh, what a payday that day.
It's everyone in that is so good. I mean, John Goodman, Adam Devine, everybody.
Yeah, that's a great series.
It definitely feels like it happens in the same universe as Eastbound and Down.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm okay. That's what I want out of my Danny McBride.
I think Danny McBride, he's one of the only actors that can really get away with very much playing the same character
Because it's such a unique character. Yeah.
Because he just molded onto the role, but like it's still very much like
Tropic Thunder is Danny McBride.
I think we watched that last year. We went through those pretty fast.
Yeah, they're pretty bingeable. They're fun.
We have a lot of binging to catch up on.
I know, that's how we are.
So yeah, let's get into season 5.
Yeah, wow, that's weird, isn't it? Let's do it. Let's talk about a shipwreck. Today we are going to be talking about the Francisco Morazan. Have you ever heard of the Francisco Morazan?
I've heard of Francisco Morazan, but not the Francisco Morazan.
Well, that's fun because I don't know who he is. Would you be able to tell us anything about him?
Francisco Morazan is I guess you'd say that he's in that same class of Latin American liberators, the same time period as your Simón Bolívar and José de San Martín, but obviously somewhat overshadowed by them because he was in Central America, which I think in general is just going to get fewer headlines and a lot less is written about it in the wider, especially the English-speaking world.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, he's like one of those sort of liberation era 18 teens, 20s, 30s, like most of those guys, military leader / politician, and sort of blending the line between what role stops where. And so he's in that whole realm of like liberal revolutionary, which sounds like an oxymoronic term in like modern English, but sort of that decolonizing, kicking Spain out of South America. And then obviously a lot of that devolves into infighting and civil war. Morazan is the president at one point of the Federal Republic of Central America, which is like Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, Nicaragua, and Costa Rica, I think it's those. Most of those Central American countries. I believe it gets its independence from Spain, and then it's like immediately annexed by the first Mexican Empire. Central America is not the easiest place to invade and conquer wholesale, so that wasn't really militarily able to be affected. So they kind of remained independent and formed their own, just like federal republic that was all of those things combined. It was extremely hectic and anarchic at times. It didn't. I mean, there's a reason that no one remembers the Federal Republic of Central America. I think total it probably only existed for like 2 to 3 solid years, like with long gaps between those. Lots of fun stories though coming out of that, where like you'll have a government that seems like it's set up and ready to go, and then something will flare up in one of the provinces. And so the political leader, who is also the most famous general, because he's the general, he leaves and he goes to put this down. And as he leaves, behind him, his vice president, who is also a general, says, well, hey, I'm going to be president now. And then you have a new civil war. That happens like multiple times in the history of Central America. But yeah, Francisco Morazan, I thought it was an interesting name for the vessel. And I was wondering if there was a reason it was named for him. If there's is there like a sister vessel, the Jose Manuel Arce? But anyway, yes. A quick run through. Oh, and like many of those guys, he ends his career trying to take back power and then getting captured and executed.
I was going to say, I noticed that it says he commanded the firing squad that executed him.
I don't know all the details, but like many of those guys, he ended in front of a firing squad. All
right. Well, that's a little background about the guy. Let's dig into the vessel. So the Francisco Morazan would begin life as the Arcadia in 1922. She was built by Deutsche Werft in Hamburg, Germany for Hamburg American Line, and she's managed by Deutsche Levant Line AG. So you know how that always goes. There's always like subcontractors and things involved, but the big thing is Hamburg American Line is the owner. So we're
the AG stands for Alles Gut.
Does it?
No, I hope not. I hope that's not part of the company's name.
So as she's built, she's 235 feet long, 37 feet wide, has a draft of 18 feet. She also has a speed of 9 knots. So this is not a big or fast vessel, really.
No.
She'd have a crew of 19. there's really nothing remarkable about this vessel when she's built.
Mm-hmm.
In 1934, she sold to Colon Import und Poseidon Schaffert, based out of Konigsberg, and there she's renamed the Elbing. 1940, the Elbing is put into service of the...
Can we pause? I feel like it wasn't captured because it doesn't look like it on paper, but Colon Import is a very funny name.
It is, isn't it? Und Poseidon. I like that.
Colon Import und Poseidon Schifffahrt, based out of Königsberg.
In 1940, the now named Elbing was put into service of the Kriegsmarine. Boo.
You suck!
Here she's planned to be used as a coal ship during Operation Sea Lion.
Nice.
For those of you who are not familiar with World War II, can you tell us what Operation Sea Lion is?
Well, I feel like you're the one who's more interested in Operation Sea Lion.
I mean, you spend all that time on U-boat.net, so I didn't know.
That was the planned Nazi invasion of Britain, correct?
Yeah. As acted out in Panzer Corps multiple times on my computer.
Which side?
You can only play one side on the campaign.
On your version, on Panzer General, you can play both sides.
On the new Panzer Corps, you can only play on one side, unfortunately. It's the final mission before you invade the United States.
That's funny because we have like versions of the same game, but like mine is the good universe version, and yours is like from the universe where the Nazis won.
So in 1941, she would sustain damage from the HMS Tartar during Operation Claymore. Operation Claymore is a British-Norwegian raid on the Luften Islands in northern Norway. This operation resulted in the destruction of important industrial facilities, along with the loss of 10 German vessels. But they actually got something even more important than any of that, and that is the rotor wheel for the Enigma machine.
The machine that allows you to watch Aaron Rodgers' documentary.
Yes, you have to have that wheel. You can't watch Aaron. So the rotor wheel would actually allow British code breakers to easily decipher German naval code. So really, that's sort of a priceless thing. Like, you can sink all the ships you want, but you would much rather have that.
If I was the Germans, I would love a fake rotor wheel for the British to capture. Mind games.
That's what Aaron Rodgers plays.
And then when they decrypt your messages and you see they're getting it all wrong, you know that they fell for the bait. It's like whenever a student misses a test and like they take it later in the week, I give them the same test, but I will just like switch the answers around, like just the order of the answers. Because presumably it's like they're not going to word for word memorize the words and all the correct answers, but they might try to memorize the letters, from one of their friends. And so that way it's like very obvious if they did memorize the original version of the test, because like all of their wrong answers match the correct ones from the previous test.
I guess that works for like a Scantron, doesn't it? So after being repaired, the Elbing would continue her service for the Reich. She would continue serving in Norwegian waters and ultimately would be returned to Colon Import in 1943. This takes us to 1945, which I would say, as the timelines go, that's a bad time to be a German ship in history.
You could probably just not include ship there. Probably just a bad time to be a German.
Unless you were on one of those ships that was going to South America, in which case you would think things were all right still.
They, by and large, deserved it.
So at this point, the Elbing's port of registry is changed to Nordenham. Around this time, it's noted that the vessel is damaged by artillery fire, and she's beached near Schweinesand,
I think.
Schweinesand Island?
Schweinesand.
I am stretching my abilities of my German here, which isn't much. That would be near Hamburg on the Elbe.
Oh, it only has a German Wikipedia page.
Oh, wow. That is...
Schweinesand oder Schweinesand, so there's both spellings, würden früher die Elbensen gegenüber is a fun German word, von Hamburg-Blankense bezeichnet. Heute bezeichnet der Name nur noch eine kleine, schilfbeständige Landzunge an der Ostseite des viel größeren Nässandes gegenüber von Blankenese.
Uh-huh.
Fascinating.
So let's see. Around this time, it's noted that she's damaged by artillery fire. She ends up near Hamburg on the Elbe.
That was good German pronunciation of Elba.
I know, right? In May, the vessel would be seized by the British Ministry of Transport. And at that point, she would be renamed the Empire Congress, and London would be her port of registry. So this thing's getting passed around. Like this, this ship has had a lot of different owners, some of them Nazis.
Like most ships.
Yeah, like most ships at this time. So at this point...
I mean, now.
Yeah, probably. At this point, she's placed under management of the Chine Trading Company out of Cardiff, Wales.
Cardiff,
yes, Cardiff. In 1946, she would be awarded to the Norwegian government, who renamed her Bruns.
Brunis?
She'd be operated under the management of K.R. Jebsen. 1947, she's sold to another Norwegian company, and she is renamed the Skuld. This is very Norwegian. Sounds like IKEA furniture.
It does.
In 1948, the vessel would be taken over by Birger Eckholt, and the ship would be named Ringus. This is a lot of owners.
Is Birger Eckholt a company or a guy?
It's a company. Probably named after a guy.
Explaining the concept of a company to an American, imagine a burger.
Yeah, imagine a burger. On the 30th of June, 1952, she's involved in a rescue operation of the Belgian cargo vessel Manhenga after it collided with the French vessel Granville. She's credited with saving 46 crew and 3 passengers before the vessel sank. So I think that's kind of interesting. You know, this thing's had a long career and a lot of owners, but you know, she sees like any vessel with this long of a career, like you're going to see some things, right?
Mm-hmm.
This brings us forward to 1952. The Ringus makes her first voyage to the Great Lakes. She'll be traveling to Muskegon, Michigan.
Nice place.
She would also visit Port Huron, Michigan in 1953. I think it's very interesting that a ship that literally was part of the German Nazi Navy is sailing in the Great Lakes in the 1950s.
Yeah, like a ship that was going to help invade England is in Muskegon, Michigan.
That is, it's a weird thing. She would visit the Great Lakes again in 1958, although now under the Greek ownership, and she would be renamed the Los Mayos. Unfortunately, this time, she would run aground off of Muskegon, Michigan. Not wanting to do the repair work, her owners sold her to CT... Oh boy, what is that?
Trapezuntios?
Yeah, CT Trapezuntios of Monrovia, Liberia.
I assume that implies that the family, at least originally, came from the city of Trebizond.
I would assume. But now we have Liberia involved. So, you know, nothing shady happens with Liberian registered vessels.
We so often do with relatively modern ship stories.
And it's at this point that the vessel's name would change once again to the Francisco Morazan.
So this was my question. It's like, why did they name it this?
The only thing I can think is that although she's owned by this company out of Monrovia, she's operated by the West Indies Transport Company and chartered by Inter-American Marine Operators. So assuming that she's operating near Central America.
Okay, that makes sense at least.
Also, I don't know if they're like Francisco Morazan may have had like a little mini resurgence at some point as like a cultural figure. There's a Liberty ship named Francisco Morazan. So,
it would make sense because he's like such a figure for like the Americas sort of becoming the Americas rather than being colonially dominated. So it does make sense that he would see like that cultural comeback. And he's on like stamps, and he might be on money. There's a district or a province, whatever they use in, I think, Honduras that's named for him.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, I think he maybe had a bigger cultural presence, 40s, 50s era.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where this just isn't a name that continued to be as probably famous as it was.
Yeah, was not a long-term winner. Did not have the legs to make it all the way to keep pace with the San Martins and the Bolivars. There's no Morazanian Republic of Venezuela.
So this let's talk about the final days of the SS Francisco Morazan, not the man.
He was not in the SS.
Wow, I didn't even think about that. With this thing being a German freighter, that works.
There ain't no Guatemalans in the SS.
God, there probably was.
There was probably some SS guys who ended up in Guatemala.
In Guatemala, yeah, you're right.
I can almost guarantee it. Because there were American special forces in Guatemala. So.
Yeah, right, one way or the other. So the final days of the Francisco Morazan would start when she would leave the port of Miami on October 21st, 1960. She's bound for Montreal and Toronto, and at this point, this is where she would successfully unload a cargo of phosphates. I'm not quite sure what all that entails.
Love
Sounds
phosphates.
Gross. Yeah, I love them. Big phosphate guy.
They're used for like fertilizer.
Right, yeah. That's pretty much all I know about phosphates.
We talked about phosphates also in the Richard A. Bingham episode. That's what they were hauling from Florida around the Caribbean originally, before they got stuck in Mexico. Our upcoming bonus episode that I have planned, and I'm finally rolling on, it reminds me in many ways of the story of the Richard A. Bingham, so I'm really enjoying planning the episode. And this is a ship that also just kind of gets stuck and detained in various places.
So after unloading that cargo, she would proceed to Chicago, arriving in mid-November. Just something to keep in the back of your mind as we talk about this. It's mid-November on the Great Lakes. Is that a great time to be on the Great Lakes? Do you really want to be out there? Especially if you're a saltwater vessel who's not an actual laker.
The songs say no. It's not.
Yeah. Gordon Lightfoot would lead me to believe it's a bad idea to do that. So she would take on a mixed cargo. Anytime you have a mixed cargo of things, it's fun to see what that entails.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, we've got bottle caps, hides, toys, and canned chicken. Toys and canned chicken will be relevant later.
The bottle cap is like the candy.
No, like the kind that's money in Fallout.
This is a Fallout vessel. I'm imagining each hold in the ship is segregated by color of bottle cap. And the root beer ones keep disappearing because the crew keeps taking them because they're the best one.
So she would depart Chicago, or as one source said, Calumet Harbor, on November 28th, 1960. I don't want to steal glory from Calumet Harbor.
Mm-hmm.
It should be noted that this trip was Captain Eduardo Triviera's first as master of the ship. So he's fairly new to this role. On board, it's a little fuzzy on the math when I was reading through it. There's somewhere between 13 and 14 people. There's the captain, and then there's 11 crew, but 12 if you include the captain in that number. But there's also the captain's pregnant wife, Anastasia, which I guess that's what...
Which is 2 people if you include the baby.
Right. I don't know how pregnant she is yet, so I don't know if I don't know if Mike DeWine has said that it's a real living thing yet. So there's something to keep in mind there, though. This is the captain's first time in command of this vessel, so you know how that goes. You want to prove that you can do the job, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Captain Triviera is getting a little nervous. From the Mantua Island Archives newsletter, Volume 1, Issue 4.
Things hadn't been working out so well for Captain... Is it Trevius or Trevisus?
That's copied, so that's his name. Whatever it's showing right there.
Okay. Things hadn't been working out so well for Captain Trevisus. He should have been underway by now, and would have been, had it not been for New York insisting he take on a last-minute consignment, as a favor to a good friend in Rotterdam. Unfortunately, that cargo had hit the dock late, and the forwarder hadn't shown up with paperwork in time to beat the long Thanksgiving Day weekend. The dock workers wouldn't be back until Monday, so he was stuck in Chicago for the next 4 days, and maybe for the winter.
So the New York here, I believe, is referring to the company headquarters. Also, another thing to keep in mind here, it's not just the weather that's going to be a problem, but also potentially getting out of the Great Lakes is going to be a problem. Continuing from the Mantua Island archives.
The next few days would have made fine Great Lakes sailing weather. The southerly winds brought unseasonably warm temperatures into the 60s, with clear skies and light breezes. Chicagoans were going around in shorts and t-shirts at the end of November. What a beautiful holiday weekend! That lasted until early Sunday afternoon, when the wind suddenly shifted from south to north. As the temperature fell and the winds died, the fog came. But it really didn't look that bad, in spite of a rather ominous forecast.
So the dock workers would return from their holiday weekend and promptly get going loading the vessel. While this is going on, weather continued to rapidly change. Anyone that's from the Midwest knows this, that it's really not an exaggeration to say that it could be 60 in the morning, and by the evening, it could be down into the 20s. It's just the way the weather works around here. So temperatures were actually steadily rising at this point. However, rain and fog begin to move in. And as the vessel departs Calumet Harbor in the morning, Lake Michigan greets her with clearing skies and shimmering blue water.
It's a trap!
Temperatures would begin to fall around noon. By 5 p.m., temperatures with wind chill would have been around 10 degrees on the deck of the vessel, with wind speeds sustained at 23 knots. Reading again from the Mantua Island archives.
By daybreak the following morning, Thursday the 29th, the Francisco Morazan had gotten ahead of the weather a little, and with slightly warmer temperatures, the snow showers changed to freezing rain. The boat and her crew were alone on the lake, having seen nothing or heard anything from anyone else during the night. By that time, their steady northward progress on the northbound 015 course had brought them just south of Muskegon, about 38 miles offshore on the Michigan side of the lake.
Back to our old nemesis, Muskegon. Captain Morazan, who's that? The captain of the Morazan must have felt relieved to finally be on the right side of the weather.
Surely he would have given himself a higher rank than captain. I guess military guys who seize power do often just go with colonel. So.
Yeah, colonel, it sounds better, right?
I think in Latin America, like generalissimo would have been more common.
So this good fortune of weather would not continue much longer. Soon the captain would not only be battling the weather, but man-made obstacles as well. Reading again from the Mantua Island archives.
Is this supposed to say, does it say bitch box?
Yep, it does. I looked it up twice.
Is that just a nickname for like the radio, the PA? Or like, is there like a communication system? This
was my first clue that this was in fact a little bit of speculative narrative going on.
Okay. Around 7:30, the engineer whistled up on the bitch box, advising that there was a problem. Going below, he found him attending to the feed pump in the boiler room. The pump was making a hell of a racket.
A couple things to unpack here. Bitch box is an amazing word.
What is it?
I'm assuming it's like the mechanical telephone, like where you yell up through the piping.
It's what you say someone's doing when they're beatboxing, but they're doing it really bad.
This is the point where, reading through the source, I realized that the author was doing a little bit of like speculative fiction.
Okay, bitch box, U.S. Navy term for an intercom or amplified circuit used to communicate between space of the ship. Okay, that's what it sounds like.
As I was first reading this, I was like, how do they know all these details? And like, as I kept going, I realized that the author was taking things that probably happened and inserting them into the story.
One of the first results is a link on Amazon that says real bitch box bucket hat. And if you click on it, it is you have to parse it differently. It is a box of bucket hat, so a style of bucket hat with straighter sides that says "real bitch" on it.
I feel
it's
like
nothing to do with the bitch box.
That should be one of our giveaways for one of our sports things.
It has 0 reviews.
So the newest problem we have here is that the pumps are beginning to have issues. It was decided that the only way the vessel could fix this problem is to stop in the middle of the lake and conduct repairs. Milwaukee was about 3 hours away, and Muskegon was about 2 hours away. So their only option was just to stop in the middle of the lake and do this.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, that allows the weather a chance to catch up. Repairs would be completed around noon, and just about that time, snow and light drizzle are beginning. Waves are beginning to build up to about 5 feet, with a stiff but calm breeze blowing. But there's definitely weather beginning to move into the area. They would then pass Ludington, Michigan around 2:45, with the wind steadily picking up as the afternoon wore on. You've been to Ludington recently, right?
Yep, that's where we boarded the Badger. The boat. For people who have not listened, the Badger is a vessel, a ship.
A car ferry like the Milwaukee that just wants to sink.
Mm-hmm. But it did not the time that we were on it. So
You've survived her twice.
Yes, actually.
On November 29th, around 6:45, the Francisco Morazan ran aground on the shoals at South Manitou Island. She would come to rest about 300 yards offshore of the island. It's interesting to know that actually, the route she would have taken to get to this spot actually passes directly over another wreck, the Walter L. Frost. She had been a 235-foot-long freighter owned by the Rutland Transport Company. She had sank in heavy fog on November 4th, 1903, on those same rocky shores of South Manitou Island.
Surely there's some kind of sailor lore about it being bad luck to sail over another wreck.
I would imagine that is frowned upon, yeah.
Has to be a thing.
Her entire crew actually did manage to safely abandon ship, and they would take shelter on the island. The wreck was eventually broken up by waves and ice, but very interesting. You're literally tripping over shipwrecks in the Great Lakes.
The wreck was bombed by multiple waves of RAF fighter bombers.
All right, this brings us back to the Manitou Island archives.
The South Manitou Island shoal was an ideal crash site. Its solid bottom of sand and rocks eliminated any possibility of the ship sinking. It was only about 9 miles from the North Manitou Island Shoal Light Station, which was manned full-time by the U.S. Coast Guard. Yet, with the ship hidden behind the island's bluff, the light was just out of eyeshot. The weather was somewhat less than ideal, with a light fog and occasional snow showers making for a dark night on rough seas, with no identifiable lights or landmarks visible along the shoreline.
So it sort of sounds like the classic best worst case scenario, right? It's clear the vessel's not going to sink immediately. The crew is able to broadcast an SOS, and the Coast Guard's alerted to the problem. Still not great. It's still a dangerous situation anytime you're dealing with weather and stuff like that. But at least people know where you are. So the first vessel to arrive on scene is the buoy tender Mesquite, which would come from Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin. She would arrive early Wednesday morning. She would then be joined by the U.S. Coast Guard cutter Mackinac from Sheboygan, Michigan. I think we've talked about the Mackinac before, haven't we?
We have, and presumably any of these stories where we're in the 50s, 60s on the lakes, you're going to run into a lot of the same Coast Guard vessels. Yeah, the Mackinac, most recently we would have talked about the Mackinac when we talked about the bonus episode for the Daniel J. Morrell, where there was that other vessel, the Nordmare, that was also in danger at the same time that the Morrell was. And there was that pretty daring rescue to get people off of the Nordmare. I believe that's the one that broke up moments after they got the last person off.
I think you're right. Yeah, almost like an action movie sequence.
And the Mackinac was also involved in the Cedarville, I believe. That one was much longer ago that we talked about that. That was season 1, I think.
Yeah, that does feel like ages ago. So unfortunately, the lake would not cooperate for an immediate rescue. There's reports of waves getting up into the range of 10 to 12 feet on the south side of the island. And this prevented the Coast Guard from deploying their lifeboats to the stranded vessel. So sort of one of those things of great, we've responded, but we really can't do anything to help you without endangering our vessel. But we know you're there.
The Marine Electric hasn't happened yet. We don't have rescue swimmers.
Yeah, right. Ashton Kutcher has not gone through the Coast Guard Rescue Swimmer program. We should watch that movie for a bonus at some point.
What's that movie called?
I can't remember.
Is that one about the Marine Electric?
No, but I think it's just like about being a rescue swimmer.
Right.
So the next vessel to arrive would be the buoy tender Sundew.
Nice.
She would arrive on scene with a breeches buoy from Charlevoix, Michigan, although she would not arrive until the next morning. The Sundew is also a reoccurring character in our stories, I believe.
From the Carl D. Bradley and probably others, I'm assuming.
I would definitely assume others, but yeah, we got the Cedarville and the Carl D. Bradley, connections in this one. So that's some of the heavy hitters in the Great Lakes. And
a more tangential one to the Daniel J. Morrell.
Yeah. So while waiting for the Sundew to arrive, the weather had actually moderated enough that a boarding party from the Mackinac was now able to go on board the vessel. The boarding party is able to, well, this is kind of like a pirate. They're able to remove the captain's wife.
Hey, that's something a pirate would do.
Consensually, though,
right,
is the difference here. And remember that she's 2 months pregnant, so that was kind of a high priority to get her off of there.
Mm-hmm.
She would be flown from the Mackinac to Traverse City, Michigan via Coast Guard helicopter and checked out at a hospital and all that good stuff. So she ends up being okay. Additionally, another pair of vessels arrive on scene. This is the salvage tug John Roan V, or Chapel Roan's descendants, I imagine.
Ancestors, I guess it would be.
Ancestor, I guess, more than descendant, yeah. Chapel Roan is a descendant of John Roan V.
Although that's not her real name.
No.
Is this the fifth tug that is named John Roan, or is this named after a guy named John Roan V?
I don't know. That's a good question. With it has a barge, the Maitland, which arrived with it on December 1st. So it's sort of that thing of, you'll have the vessel and then like the old, almost like the schooner barges, that it would tow with it.
So why would a salvage tug already have what's the benefit of it towing a barge?
I think it's to give you workspace and tools, material, that kind of thing.
Like a guy with a pickup hauling a trailer full of stuff. I guess
pretty
that makes
much.
Sense.
Yeah. So with the scene settled and everything began to calm down, the Sundew and Mesquite would end up leaving, and that just means that the Mackinac is kind of the only Coast Guard vessel on scene at this point. So it's the Mackinac and the salvagers. Keep in mind that the crew is still on board the Morazan. It's kind of like what we were talking about with the Torrey Canyon. They're kind of just hanging out with it,
And I know, to an extent, I don't know about this particular situation. I know in at least most situations, they have to leave someone on the vessel so that it's not, technically abandoned.
Yeah. I think in this case, it's just that they hadn't had an opportunity.
Yeah, that doesn't seem like
other than the one pregnant woman who was a high priority case. So on December 2nd, salvage engineers from Rome Salvage and insurance agents were airlifted on board. It quickly became apparent that the cargo might be salvaged, but the vessel was a total loss. And this is where you start getting into that weird stuff with salvaging where if you don't salvage anything, you're just out the money. So,
right.
They have a lot of drive to want to salvage anything that they can off of this. The crew and the salvagers would remain on board the vessel until the 5th of December. And at this point, this is the 6th day that the crew has been stranded on board the vessel. I'm sure they're ready to get off of there because, they're not making any money off of the salvage. The salvagers, every single can of chicken they save is money in their pocket. But if you're the crew, you're kind of just there.
For a lot of them, it's probably the most, I don't know, jarring experience, and it probably sticks with them their whole life. They probably go back to December all the time, I'm guessing.
You think? So their evacuation would be prompted by warnings posted from the National Weather Service, which predicted gale force winds in the area. Mackinac would evacuate the crewmen to Traverse City, where the crew then had the further indignity of being placed into custody of immigration officials. Imagine you've been stuck on a ship that's wrecked for 6 days, and your reward is to go deal with some Michigan immigration officer.
Out of the ice and into the ice.
You'll be fighting children for one of those aluminum foil blankets.
I would assume that a sailor would win that.
You think, but what have they been? They've been eating nothing but canned chicken for 6 days.
That's true. I'd like to know the bathroom situation on the Francisco Morazan.
Over the side, I guess. Lake Michigan is your bathroom.
I was just imagining someone eating canned chicken. Like, I assume that means that you dump it out of the can and you cook it on something, but I'm just imagining someone like popping it and just like.
Oh no! It's that kind of canned chicken. Like it's like tuna. You can just eat it out of the can.
Like a Vienna sausage.
Absolutely, it's a chicken Vienna sausage, but mashed up.
Hmm.
So the salvage crew, along with the barge, would take shelter in the bay of South Manitou Island. And this is ordered to remain on scene and attempt to salvage anything that was left after the weather would clear. So at this point, they're the only ones left at the wreck scene, are the salvagers. Ultimately, they would give up on this, though, after the weather cleared. It was apparent that there was nothing worth salvaging at this point. The time, the effort, the danger involved, just the dollars weren't there.
It's all chicken, boss.
Let's see. We have another quote here.
Roan Salvage had a diver on board, as requested by Captain Trevisus. But on Friday, the group inspection of the ship's interior made it plain to Roan and company representatives Alvin Tublin and James Sweeney, who had flown in from New York, that she wasn't worth what it would cost to lighter the cargo, pull her off the shoal, and tow her to Sturgeon Bay for repairs. Tublin and Sweeney, representing the owners, therefore ordered further efforts to salvage the ship stopped.
In January 1961, representatives from the insurers of the cargo awarded a contract to Lake Michigan Hardwood Company for the salvage of the remaining cargo. So that's one other fun thing with salvage, is like there's always someone willing to pick up smaller. It's like debt collecting.
Mm-hmm.
There's just always someone willing to eat your scraps. Lake Michigan Hardwood would contract with George Grosvenor of Leland, Michigan, and he's actually the owner of a small mailboat, the Smiling Through.
That's interesting because most boats are female.
So for those of you who aren't familiar with what a mailboat is, look up the mailboat on Lake Geneva in Wisconsin. It's like a perfect example of it. It's literally just these little boats that would go deliver mail around lakes and stuff.
They're assigned mailboat at birth.
So these mailboats are unique, though. They're designed to work in shallow water with a high degree of maneuverability. That would be advantageous in a situation like this.
Much like a Viking longship.
So the way this is planned is that the Smiling Through would unload the wreck and then transfer the cargo to the Glen Shore, which was a larger vessel. This would then take the recovered freight to Leland, Michigan, and from there it would be shipped via truck to Chicago. The biggest prize that they're after is what was estimated to be about 5 tons of Blue Star canned chicken and animal hides. However, this operation never really took off, and it had to be cut short due to storms, making the conditions too dangerous to retrieve said canned chicken.
A hold full of animal hides just sounds like that's a very throwback thing to be carrying.
Also, just
in your
imagine
ship.
all those damp animal hides.
And now they've got all this, they've got like spilled canned chicken soaking into them.
This is definitely not the Athens Queen.
There were a lot of chickens on the Athens Queen. Near 200 of them. But they were not in cans.
So as we know, there's not much to do in Michigan in the 1950s and 60s. What there is a hulk of a shipwreck with stuff on it. That means it becomes a local tourist attraction and a source of income for locals.
And adventurers in Skyrim. Much of the remaining cargo was removed over the years that followed by scavengers and private would-be salvagers. Islanders spoke highly of the Blue Star canned chicken, which they claimed was delicious right out of the can.
Canned chicken is disgusting.
What, you're eating chicken that you found on a shipwreck?
So
They don't have grocery stores in Michigan?
this is chicken of the sea, okay?
That sounds like a dare that like the town bully would like him and his friends are hanging out and he's like, I bet you won't eat the chicken.
Oh, you think this would attract a bunch of local teenage boys to hang out, do you?
I do. I think this would be like what Hussein talks about on Trash Future with drinking out of the puddle. Eat that whole can of chicken or you're gay.
So not only was the vessel a source of delicious canned chicken, it also became a spot to hang out for the local boys.
It's just a bit parents having to tell their kids, "Now, don't you go eat. You better not be eating that chicken off that ship."
There's other things that the boys want from the ship. Continuing here with another excerpt.
The shipwreck was naturally a great plaything for boys. Among its obvious attractions, the cargo included a consignment of balsa wood model airplanes manufactured by Monogram Models of Chicago, a great find for boys of any age.
Again, there wasn't much to do, so you were happy to eat your canned chicken and have a balsa wood airplane.
Oh, hell, brother. Hand me another can of chicken. That kind of turns into an advertisement at the end. Monogram Models of Chicago, a great find for boys of any age.
Don't forget your Blue Star canned chicken. Tragically, though...
Just having to tell kids not to go play on the shipwreck because you're worried they're going to eat canned chicken that they find.
Tragically, the wreck of the Francisco Morazan would claim her only fatality from one of these boys.
Was it the chicken?
It was not the chicken. It was Lake Michigan. August of 1967 found a pair of local youths around 16 years old exploring the ship. One of them would become lost while exploring the flooded holds of the vessel and drown in the darkness. I say, can we blame the Nazis for this?
Basically.
I don't see how we can't.
The Nazis and Blue Star chicken.
You know, nowadays you probably would be able to sue like the balsa wood airplane manufacturer, like invitation to danger.
Yeah, you made them too enticing.
In August of 1968, Frank Kelly, the Attorney General of the state of Michigan, filed a suit to have the rusting hulk removed. He cited the vessel as dangerous and damaged in its condition, and her rotting cargo posed a public health risk. He did not want people to eat the chicken. Additionally, he alleged that the rusting hull and tanks presented an environmental risk, as she still had almost 6,500 gallons of fuel on board. I know after the Torrey Canyon, that seems like a paltry amount, but I also think he's probably looking for any and all ways he can to like take care of this problem.
Wondering if he can get authority to bomb it.
Mm-hmm.
To burn off all of this chicken.
It's interesting to note that the environmental threats, I was reading through some of the stuff that he was writing, it's not about the animals, it's about the tourism at the beaches.
Mm-hmm. Much like with the beaches of Torrey Canyon, yeah.
Yeah, like it is not about making the environment nice for the critters. Named defendants in this suit were the Francisco Morazan Corporation of Leland, Michigan, the Moa Navarra Company of Panama City, Panama, and the Time and Freight Charterings of New York. So a lot of just random companies that were involved in this thing. You have like a salvaging company. You've got all kinds of different things. You're pretty much just suing anyone that has anything to do with this and hoping someone fixes it, right?
Mm-hmm.
In a mysterious act that was all too perfectly timed out to be incidental, the Francisco Morazan would burn the day after the lawsuit was filed. This solved the problem of the cargo and the fuel. It also weakened the structure of the vessel and caused it to break down further, because I guess jet fuel can damage metal.
It can certainly weaken it enough to potentially collapse.
As a result of the fire, the Attorney General's lawsuit was dropped, as it was no longer worth pursuing. The vessel would pass into ownership of the state of Michigan and is now protected as part of the Manitou Passage Underwater Preserve. So now she's protected. She is still a tourist attraction to this.
So is that something you can dive on?
You can. I did see in some of the local diving guides, it suggests to not snorkel because there's a lot of jagged metal if you try to stay on the surface. If you go to the island on Google Maps and drop a pin on the south side of it, you can still see the hulk rising out of the water. So this is literally still a thing today. It's very interesting, though. The thing that caught my eye with this one was, like how does a vessel that's in the Kriegsmarine end up wrecked on South Manitou Island in Lake Michigan? It's very interesting.
Yeah, this is like that Oak Ridge campaign scenario from Panzer General, but taken to its like extreme. They've pushed well into the continental United States.
and Lake Michigan pushed back.
Yeah.
So yeah, that is the story of the Francisco Morazan. It definitely stood out to me as I was looking through it. It was it's interesting just seeing all the weird little quirks that had to happen for it to end up where it did.
Where did you find this one?
Honestly, I don't remember. I might have been flipping through one of my Great Lakes shipwreck books, actually. It's a fun way to kind of merge two of my favorite things, World War II and Great Lakes.
And the death of children.
And the death of children.
Looking for airplanes and chicken. I thought this was cool. It's a good way to get into season 5, the Great Lakes. My next one, I think, will take us to somewhere that we have been... Actually, yeah, on a main episode. We've been here before. If I get everything done the way I want it to be, we'll be back in the Sea of Okhotsk.
Nice. We got the first one done here for this season, and I'm looking forward to doing some more. I think with all that, we'll say enjoy. Hope you guys have a great week, and we will be back with more soon. Thanks for listening.